Just for the record, if you hear something in the background, that is my 9-month-old lab named Grant. If I continue to do these, you're going to continue to hear him. So just get ready for that. One thing I always do is I'm checking forums and message boards and all sorts of things like that. I'm always looking for things to help me make my next purchase. So right now I'm shooting on a Panasonic G7. This is a camera that I found out pretty quickly is a nice budget-friendly 4K camera. And from what I see a lot of people posting, there's a lot of people that are looking for that. So, quick background, I started my business with the Sony a6000. Absolutely loved it. That was my first investment, and that really helped my real estate business get off the ground, and now I'm working towards other things. So before I blabber too much, let's get into it really quickly. This guy right here is the Panasonic G7. This is the first Panasonic I actually got my hands on. Ridiculously good for the price. So one thing I always see, like I said earlier, is there's always people posting about budget cameras and you can't break the bank. Well, you can get this guy right here and this 14-42 kit lens that comes with it for $500, and that's not including tax, but that is an extreme deal for 4K video. It is a micro 4/3 sensor, which is really nice because there's so many lenses that you can adapt to this guy right here. It also very user-friendly. The ergonomics of the camera has been awesome. I could tell a night and day difference between navigating through this and navigating through my Sony. Much easier, not to mention the flip out LCD touchscreen is phenomenal. Right now I'm shooting a vlog and I can see myself and make sure I'm still in focus. While I'm talking about that, another awesome perk is that there's an app for Panasonic cameras that allows you to view your stuff while you are shooting. Very good. Sony, you can't do that. So real quick, I'm going to talk about the positives of this camera. You get 4K video at 100 megabits per second. It will eat up SD cards a lot quicker than your HD video, but it's well worth it, much more crisp. Even with the kit lens, which isn't the sharpest lens you can find for this thing, obviously, you can still get some really quality video out of it. The next thing, it's a nice big size, but it's very light camera. It also has a microphone input, which is really nice for when you're doing things like this. I normally use my H5 to record separate audio and sync it in post, but when I'm doing these vlogs, it's going to be very simple to stick a microphone on top and just make it happen. It does have autofocus built in these Panasonic and Olympic lenses. It's nice, but it's not Sony nice. The a6000 really spoiled me from a focus standpoint, especially starting out a video business. The autofocus system on those Sonys is absolutely incredible, and that's a big struggle with whether I wanted to move up to one of these for 4K or go with a 6300 or 6500. Aside from the point, autofocus on here is pretty good. The one thing I've noticed in shooting some of my interviews is that if the interviewee begins to raise his hands or do any type of movement up here, it'll lose a little focus on the face. But for the most part, if you use the 49 area and you set it on the face, it works pretty well. There are ways to work around that. What you can do is, obviously, if you're using manual focus them in and then stop it up just a little bit so that it gives you a wider depth of field and focus, and it's nice and easy so you don't have to worry so much. But the autofocus is working really well. Hopefully this video looks good. The next thing that's really nice about this camera is being able to adapt lenses to it. Right here is a 50mm f1.8 Canon FD lens. You can snag one of these for from $35 to $50 online. I found this in an old camera shop up the road. You buy this and a $20 adapter and you can stick this 50mm FD lens on the camera. Now it does have a crop factor, so it ends up being a 100mm looking shot, but that's okay. You get a nice shallow depth of field. It looks really great on this thing. The next thing is your picture profiles. There's several different picture profiles. You do have Cinelike V and Cinelike D. Right now I'm shooting in Cinelike D. Looks great. I'm going to be able to grade it just a bit, but because it is 8-bit footage, you're not going to be able to really push colors like you would with something like the GH4, who could get some 10-bit and then with an external recorder, and then also the GH5, which you can record 10-bit 422 with in camera, which is insane. Now that I've talked about some of the good things, we're going to review real quick. It is 4K footage at 100 megabits per second. You can get up to 30 frames per second with that. Next, the ergonomics of the camera is great. It's nice and easy to hold. It's big enough to hold in your hands. I have very large hands. The menu interface is very easy to navigate. Having a touch screen that tilts and swivels out is amazing. It's so good to have that for when you're doing projects like this. And then on top of that, the idea of autofocus with lenses that come with it, and then also being able to adapt so many other lenses because of the flange distance on the camera. It is incredible. So now that we talked about all the good things, I'll go through a brief section of the things that are somewhat problematic with this camera, but not absolutely horrible and not deal breakers for the price point. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that there is no headphone jack. So you can't really check your levels. You do have audio meters on the screen, which is really nice, but you can't really check your levels. So be prepared to do some post-processing of that audio to make sure it sounds good. The next thing that is problematic for me is the fact that you can't hook up an external monitor through these. But that said, your LCD screen is very sharp. It looks really good. So that's not a huge problem or a huge deal breaker for me. For some people, it may be. So if you run the HDMI out to a monitor, you can't do that in record mode. Now, if you're running it to something to externally record it, I believe it works. I have not tested that yet. Again, I'm still learning tons of things. So, take everything I say with a grain of salt, but I believe you can do that. It doesn't change your recording settings. You still record 8-bit 420 color, so at 4K. So it's still not going to be able to push colors and do everything you want to do with the grading. And on to the next point, the autofocus system is not the greatest. Coming from having that Sony a6000, stepping into this, I was expecting lightning quick autofocus. Even though I read it wasn't horrible, it's still not what the Sony is. That said, it does a pretty good job for what I need it to do. I'm not shooting real estate with these. I'm not shooting photography with these. That's not my purpose. When I snagged these two guys, I got them specifically for things such as this, where I can sit down, record nonstop, shoot an interview with somebody, get some nice crisp 4K footage, set up 2 camera angles, and even have possibly 2 tights and 1 wide because of the ability to be able to crop and post. If you're just starting out, this is a beautiful camera to get started with for a budget. Jump on it for $500. It's absolutely incredible. Things I would recommend to grab with it. If you're shooting anything where you're going to be moving around with the camera because the stabilization isn't amazing on it, I would definitely get a Zygon crane or something like that. I use those. That's what I can sit this guy on. And because it's nice and light, that crane actually holds it really well and does a good job with it. That is the rundown of the Panasonic G7. Thanks again for tuning in. This is going to be fun. And I hope I can bring a lot of information to people who are curious to get started and be on the watch, because I do plan on shooting another one of these that talks about Filmic Pro app for your iPhone, which I used to shoot a ton of video while I was in New York City recently shooting with someone. And I would love to share a lot about that because it's been incredible. So continue to tune in. Again, my name is Jake with Vista View Productions, and I hope to see you all again.